New footage of Lauryn Hill shocks everyone. Artists were sold for money. What if I told you Lauryn Hill wasn't just making music? She was warning us all along. The 90s were a golden era of music, where hits dominated the airwaves, artists seemed larger than life, and the industry appeared to be a magical dream factory. But beneath the surface, a different story was unfolding, one of control, exploitation, and heartbreak. Lauryn Hill, one of the most iconic voices of the decade, was more than a Grammy-winning artist. She was a prophet of sorts. Through her lyrics and interviews, she hinted at something sinister about the industry she once thrived in. But were we too distracted by her brilliance to notice? Or worse, did we ignore her on purpose? Let's rewind to the 90s, the era of blockbuster albums and untouchable record labels. Lauryn Hill, with her raw talent and unmatched charisma, stood at the center of it all. But her meteoric rise came with a warning we didn't fully understand back then. So what exactly was Lauryn Hill trying to tell us? And why does her message still matter today? Buckle up, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you see your favorite artist and the industry they're part of. The 90s. What a time to be alive. Music was everything. Radio hits dominated the airwaves. Music videos defined our screens, and stars like Tupac, Whitney, and Mariah were practically royalty. On the surface, it was the golden era of creativity, where anything felt possible. But here's the twist. Beneath all the glitz and glam, there was a system that thrived on something far darker. Record labels held all the power. And when I say all, I mean it. They weren't just producing music, they were running an empire, one that saw artists less as individuals and more as assets. For these labels, it wasn't about the art or the message, it was about cold, hard cash. Contracts were designed to be traps, offering upfront money that felt like a dream, but came with invisible chains. Artists would celebrate their big break, only to later discover they owed their label everything: tour expenses, promotions, even wardrobe costs. The result? Many ended up broke despite selling millions of records. Let's not forget the psychological toll. Labels controlled everything: what you wore, what you said, and how you sounded. Your identity, stripped away, packaged, and sold. If you didn't fit the mold or started to question the system, you were labeled as difficult, or worse, cast aside. This wasn't just exploitation, it was systemic manipulation. They sold artists the dream of fame while keeping them trapped in a nightmare of control and dependency. And for someone like Lauryn Hill, who wasn't about to play by anyone's rules, this system was the exact thing she wanted to dismantle. Lauryn Hill wasn't just an artist, she was a force of nature, a truth teller in an industry that thrived on silence. Through her interviews, lyrics, and actions, Lauryn dropped breadcrumbs, warning us about the machine behind the music. Take a closer look at the miseducation of Lauryn Hill. It wasn't just an album, it was a manifesto. Songs like Lost Ones weren't merely catchy, they were layered with meaning, speaking to betrayal, control, and the cost of staying true to oneself. In one interview, Lauryn boldly declared, "They want to control, to enslave, to manipulate." She wasn't mincing words, she was drawing battle lines. And then there were the subtle, almost poetic jabs in her public appearances. Lauryn didn't shy away from saying what others wouldn't. She called out the industry's treatment of artists, likening it to a factory that churned out hits but chewed up human beings in the process. "They don't want thinkers, they want puppets," she once said. Her honesty was both her strength and her Achilles heel. In an industry obsessed with maintaining its facade, Lauryn's willingness to peel back the curtain was dangerous. It made her a target. Now, let's pause for a moment. Think about it. How many artists at the peak of their careers would risk it all to speak truth to power? Lauryn could have stayed quiet, continued making hits, and enjoyed her fame. But that wasn't her. She saw the system for what it was, and wasn't afraid to call it out, even if it meant paying the price. But was she truly alone in her fight? Or were others just too scared to join her? Let's uncover more as we dig into the ripple effects of Lauryn's rebellion and what it cost her. The 90s music scene wasn't all glitz and glamour. It was a machine that turned creativity into currency, often at the expense of the artists themselves. Lauryn Hill wasn't the only one to experience this. Her story is part of a much bigger picture. Let's talk contracts. These were agreements designed not to empower artists, but to entrap them. Many 90s icons, from TLC to Toni Braxton, sold millions of records yet found themselves broke. TLC's Lisa Left Eye Lopez once famously broke down the numbers, explaining how their massive success barely covered their bills. How is it possible that these global superstars couldn't even pay their mortgages? Record labels held all the cards. They controlled everything, from what songs artists could record to how their earnings were distributed. Contracts often contained hidden clauses that left artists drowning in debt, paying back expenses the labels had supposedly covered. And then there was the price of rebellion. Lauryn Hill, for example, refused to be molded into a product. She wouldn't play the industry's game. And the fallout was brutal. The industry labeled her as difficult, a kiss of death for anyone trying to sustain a career. She was ostracized, and the media painted her as unstable, all because she dared to demand autonomy. Here's the kicker. Lauryn wasn't the only one. Mariah Carey, Prince, and even Michael Jackson spoke out about how the industry exploited its talent. Lauryn's struggle wasn't unique. It was emblematic of an entire system built on silencing individuality and creativity. So when we think about the 90s, it's not just about the music. It's about the cost of that music. Lauryn Hill was one of the few who stood up and said, "Enough." But at what cost? Standing up to the machine comes with consequences, and Lauryn Hill bore them all. Speaking truth to power meant alienation, criticism, and being boxed into a narrative she couldn't control. Lauryn's fallout with the industry wasn't just a career hiccup, it was systematic. The same media that once celebrated her turned on her, branding her as erratic and ungrateful. Fans who didn't understand the full picture started to question her too. Why wasn't she making more music? Why did she seem to retreat from the spotlight? The truth is, Lauryn wasn't just fighting the industry. She was battling the toll it took on her mental and emotional health. In interviews, she spoke about how the pressures of fame and exploitation nearly broke her. Imagine creating something as revolutionary as the miseducation of Lauryn Hill, only to feel trapped by the very success it brought. And let's not forget the cultural implications. Lauryn, a black woman, speaking out against predominantly white-owned corporations, was a bold act of defiance. The industry wasn't just protecting its interests, it was protecting its power. The narrative was clear: if you dare to challenge the system, you will pay the price. Lauryn Hill paid that price. But even in her absence, her message has remained loud and clear, a warning for those who come after her. But was it worth it? Did her sacrifice spark a change, or did the industry simply move on, finding new ways to exploit talent? Fast forward to today, and Lauryn Hill's warnings are as relevant as ever. The music industry has changed, sure, but has it really? Sure, there are new platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube, which offer artists more ways to reach fans. But despite the rise of streaming, the same exploitative practices continue to thrive. The shift to streaming has shifted power, but it's not necessarily for the better. Artists still see a fraction of the revenue generated from their music, while the platforms, record labels, and other middlemen rake in profits. So, what's really changed? And then there's the pressure to create content constantly, with social media making it even harder for artists to keep up with the demands of the industry. Many musicians today are still caught in the cycle Lauryn warned us about, pushed to sacrifice their artistry for marketability. So, while technology might have evolved, the core issue remains: the exploitation of artists. Lauryn Hill saw it then, and she was telling us what we still need to hear now. Lauryn Hill wasn't just making music, she was leaving a blueprint, a roadmap for future generations to follow. She wasn't just speaking out for herself, she was speaking out for every artist whose talent was being used as a commodity by the very industry that claimed to support them. Her legacy isn't just in the songs we still play today. It's in the message that echoes through the years. Lauryn Hill was right about the 90s and about the music industry. The question is, now that we know the truth, what are we going to do about it? Let's not just sit back and let the system continue. Artists today are still facing many of the same challenges Lauryn faced. It's time we start demanding more for them, and more from ourselves. So, drop your thoughts in the comments. Was Lauryn Hill right about the 90s? Let's talk about it.